podcast. I am Benjamin Jay, your host. You can find me on Instagram at BNJMNJY, and you can find Form and Function at FF Salon EDU. But I want to thank you up front for tuning in, checking us out. The feedback that we've been getting off of these first few episodes has been awesome. It has felt so good to be back into the content creation mode and putting stuff out there. Previously, if you guys didn't see any of our YouTube work, I used to have a show called FNF Q&A where people could submit questions and then we would answer them on the show. That still lives on YouTube. I think there's still a ton of value. But doing this new platform, this new medium, has been great. So one of the things that I am trying to do with our salon podcast here is create something that appeals to many different people. My perspective of being an owner and really focusing on the business side of things, I don't want it to only be that, but I do think that this is an episode that is going to be very important for owners and managers, and that's because we're talking about building a team. Now, if you have a goal of someday opening a business, building a team, hiring people, becoming an employer, this will be fantastic for you. But I also think that it could just be a really good information for anybody in the salon world. You know, the more you know, the better it'll be for you. So today we're going to be talking about building a team. I recently went to a salon owners roundtable meeting, and sometimes these kind of things can be great. You can leave inspired, having a bunch of ideas. And other times you can kind of leave thinking like, you know, like I think that's the best way that I could describe it. And so this past one that I left, you know, it was somebody that owned a pretty successful salon that, you know, lots of people admire. And his remark about his team was that the ATM was his best employee because it never called in sick and it made about $400 a month. And I just it blew my mind that that was the way to talk about a team. The reality is anybody that is a manager that is in charge of hiring, anybody that is an owner that is doing the hiring, the people that are in your business are there because of you. And so if you think, man, you know, we don't have the right team in place. Well, they're there because of you. And so, you know, there's nobody to blame but yourself if you don't feel like you don't have the right people. But the way that I want to lay this out is I believe a team is really important. I would not be able to do what we do. We would not be able to have the business that we have if it weren't for the team that gets everything done. And so I'm a big believer in the idea that you can't fly solo. Now I should put air quotes around can't. You can. I just don't feel like it is as easy or that you get as far. I think that that's kind of a bit of opposite to the trend that our industry is going. I think that there are many different reasons that maybe we'll get into at some point, but there's many different reasons why so many people look to being freelance or an independent artist as being the best way for them to go with their career. And that's totally fine. Some people are going to be really, really good at it. But I think a lot of people that is not the right path for them to go down. And so for me, the right path for me to go down is a team-based environment. I think that one of the things that's happening in our industry is that you're seeing the middle squeezed out. Very much the same way that you're seeing this sort of trend happen in many different markets, many different areas of life. You're seeing a lot of growth in the very, very small single chair or maybe even just two people type of salon situations. And I think you're seeing growth in the big salons, the type of places where maybe people could use it as a platform to start a career, or they can just get in somewhere that has systems in place that they can grow from. The middle area, the sort of moderate size salon or small salon even, it does become a lot harder because you don't have the ability as easily to provide education. You don't have the ability to provide a career path as clearly, and certainly things that are extra benefits like a retirement program or insurance, they get more expensive when you don't have a lot of people enrolled in those sort of things. And so that's why I think the middle is really, really hard. You can push through it and you can either go up, or maybe staying small is the right answer. But I think that a team is important. I was fortunate enough that when I was growing up here in Chicago, and I promised to try to not use sports analogies. I know that this is like the second episode out of 3 that I might use a sports and a basketball analogy of that. But this one's important to me, so I got to use it. In the 90s, growing up here, we had the best basketball team that has ever been assembled, and that was the 90s era Chicago Bulls. Now, I use this team as a metaphor because I think a lot of people remember them, and hopefully, even if you're not a sports fan, you can hang with me on this. But on that team, we had at least 3 players that will go down as in the top 50 players to ever play. You had countless all-stars and Hall of Famers. You had one of the best coaches of all time. But the thing is, each of them understood that they were part of a bigger picture, and they were able to play a role so that the team could all achieve what they needed to achieve. Right? Now, of course, Michael Jordan is the superstar, best player of all time. In the salon, we want to be superstars. I assume that everybody that is listening to this podcast wants to be a successful stylist, a successful owner, and so we want to be superstars. We want to be the best that we can possibly be. The second role, Scottie Pippen was insanely talented and an amazing player on his own right. But what was funny about Jordan and Pippen was Jordan could not win a championship before Pippen got there, and Pippen didn't win a championship when Jordan retired the first time. They needed each other to complement each other in order to achieve what they wanted to do. They added at one point Dennis Rodman to the team, and Dennis was certainly a wild card, and he brought a lot of things to the table, like amazingly colorful hair, but he still knew what he was there for defense and rebounding, and for the most part, when he played the game, that's what he was focused on. And Phil Jackson, if you've got these sort of personalities, egos, insanely talented people, his ability to corral them and get everybody to put down that ego and work towards a greater good was super important. And so that's sort of the philosophy that I have for teamwork in a salon, right? You've got your Jordan, your superstar, that's your stylist. You've got your Pippen, who's there to help and assist, and maybe that's your protege or salon assistant. Dennis Rodman's there for rebounding, defense, maybe that's your customer service. You got Phil Jackson, he's the coach, that's the salon owner there to help motivate and corral everybody and push people forward. And so I think a teamwork really, really matters, and I hope that sports analogy wasn't too deep, but teamwork really matters. So how do we go about getting this team? All right. Now, there's really 2 phases to building a team, and that is recruiting and hiring. And it's important to understand that the 2 of those, those 2 concepts are different, right? Recruiting is not hiring, and hiring is not recruiting. The difference is we are always recruiting, but we are not always hiring. The reason that we're always recruiting is because I always want people to work at Hair Loft. That only makes sense, right? And that way, as soon as we are in a position to hire, I know that we're going to have interested people that have been watching Hair Loft, that know of Hair Loft, and they go, I want to work there. Now for us, we tend to hire out of beauty school. We've got a great relationship with our local schools here. Paul Mitchell schools tend to be our resource for where we hire from. But we tend to hire right out of beauty school, and we put them into our training program, and we get people going. So the way that we recruit is really important. We are constantly engaging with our local schools. If they're doing career fairs, we want to go and attend. If they're doing hiring events, if they do a thing called guest artist, where you can come in and sort of showcase your salon, maybe do a presentation that's usually about 2 hours. I went in for that guest artist platform or program, and that's what allowed me to travel across the country, was being able to be the best guest artist that I could be. So in 5 years, we did 100 school visits under that program. And so that's an amazing way for you to recruit, because you are able to go in, plant some seeds, let them know who you are, get exposed to the student base at that school, and then hopefully you connect with them, and then they are interested once they are close to graduation to come and get you. Another one is host your own event. And so instead of going into the school in order to present in their environment, bring the students to your environment. We did something called Launchpad, which was essentially a class for students on what is it going to be like to get your career off the ground. Sort of a pun. I like that. Launchpad, get your career off the ground. But it was great. You know, the students felt like they had never seen or been a part of anything like that. Nobody else had come and shared something like that. And so it was fantastic to get them to engage on our terms and not us having to come to their terms. And then another one for recruitment is the content that you're putting out. Now, I know often if we're talking about marketing and we talk about content and what we're putting out online, it oftentimes, I think, is geared towards, we think of it gearing towards consumers, right? We want to get clients to come into the salon. We want to get new guests. But everything that you're putting out is talking about your reputation as a business to the people that potentially want to work there as well. And so, for instance, this podcast is a piece of content. Maybe there's a student in school listening to this, they hear it, and they're like, man, like Ben is so on point. Like, I believe in that message. I want to work at Hair Loft. And so everything that you are putting out that is content is going to connect with somebody, and it may be connecting with people that are potentially wanting to work in your business. So when it comes to this recruiting and hiring, there are knowns and there are unknowns. And this is, again, why we always want to be recruiting. I know, looking at my numbers, in the last 9 years, everybody that I've hired, I've retained 60% of those people. The unknown is, and I think that it's just life, you don't know who or when somebody might leave, right? And there's any number of different reasons. Maybe somebody needs to cut their hours back. Maybe somebody is going to move across the country. Whatever the case may be. But you have to be prepared and ready in case a unknown situation happens to come up. And so I believe in over-hiring just a little bit. If you are playing it safe and you do have that person that's, unfortunately, change of life, they end up moving on, then you are in a really tough situation, especially if you haven't been recruiting, because now you don't have anybody to fulfill that need. And if they are assisting really busy stylists, that is a potential disaster and creates a bad situation where those people then that are revenue producing do not have the support in order to then be revenue producing. So if we're recruiting right and we've got people coming in, they want to work for us, what is the hiring process? Now, I think everybody is going to have a slightly different process, and that's what makes things so much fun. I want to share how we go about our process. It's really a series of three interviews. And the first interview is just a simple chat. Have them come in, we'll sit down, we'll talk, we keep it pretty casual. I don't want to be intimidating. We want to be friendly and welcoming. But the biggest thing is during this conversation, we want to make sure that this person fits our culture. The most important question that I ask on that interview is, why did you want to be a hairstylist? Now, some people will give me an inspired answer. Some people will give me just sort of a meh answer, right? A meh answer would be, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do after high school, and my parents told me I had to do something, so I decided that I would give hair a chance. That's not really what I'm looking for. I might get an inspired answer that's more along the lines of, through my personal development and changing my style, I was hugely impacted by that, and I want to be able to give that to others. That would be an amazing answer for us, and that was much more in line with what we talked about on episode 1 about doing it on purpose, having a purpose, and hiring people based off of the purpose or the reason why you are in business. So they have to be a culture fit, because again, like I said at the top of the show, they're here because of you. And so if you're doing the hiring and you walk in and you're like, so-and-so's still here, like, I can't stand working with Jonathan or whoever. If they're there and you hired them, then that's on you, and you only have yourself to blame. So really trying to get to know them. As a personality, is this somebody that I'm going to want to be spending 8, 10, 12 hours a day with them? Do I want to see them for 40 or 50 hours a week? And that is really, really important. We hire for culture, not for talent. Other things that I like to try and get into is I want to know what is their understanding of service. In the salon world, we understand that there's a salon on every corner. You can get a haircut at every single price point. And so really it comes down to being able to deliver tremendous service and give the guest an experience that is different than other places. And so there's a great quote that I got from Terry Cowan, which was, in order to deliver great service, you have to appreciate great service. And I think that is so true. And so one of the questions, or one of the areas that I try and take my conversations into with people is, where do you go that you go because you love the service, not because of the product, right? Like, I remember in one of my interviews, somebody said that they go to this local music store instead of going to like a big Guitar Center, because they like how the small music store, even though it's a little bit more expensive, they are able to teach how to use the material, or that they really seem to care about the product that they were giving, and they engage, they're always talkative, versus when you go to the big box store and it's a little cheaper, but nobody really seems to care about the stuff that they're doing or what they're selling. That was one example. And so, that's the type of attitude that we want to have in our business, because, while we're not the most expensive salon, we're not the cheapest, and we are charging a premium for our service, and we want to deliver that great service experience. Another way that I might approach it is, tell me about your best vacation. And when they tell me about their vacation, I want to know, A, are they engaging, right? Because that's something that's really important for our clients when they're sitting there. If they want to talk during their service, you want it to be entertaining. But also, what made that vacation great? Was it the service at the hotel? Was it the experience that they had going to Disney World? Whatever the case is, but I want to make sure that they understand how important the service experience is to the guest and how much they themselves have appreciated it. Looking at their resume, I'm not really much of a resume person, to be honest. I think that when people are coming out of beauty school, again, I said that generally is who we tend to hire. I think that most resumes end up looking the same. It's nice when they have a little bit of creativity, some graphic design, just because it makes it more interesting. It's not really an extra selling point. But what I do like to see is people that took full advantage of their school experience. And I know Paul Mitchell schools. I don't necessarily know the ins and outs of places like Aveda or Pivot Point, but I am certain that all places have extracurricular programs that students can be a part of. A design team, an extra honors program, things like that. And so what has always surprised me is that when these students are going to these schools and they're making this major investment and major life choice, you tend to have the people that go all in and they want to be a part of, at least some, if not all, of these extracurricular activities. And then you have the people that just sort of want to sit at the back of a room and, give me my paper and my license. I want to get out of here. That second group, I'm not really interested in it, not because they're not talented, but because they're not taking advantage. And I assume that if they're not taking advantage in school, that they are most likely not going to want to take advantage of the systems that we have in the salon in order to promote their growth. And they have already basically created their habits, right? It's very, very hard to change habits. And so if somebody is a go-getter, is trying to do every program that they have in school, I assume that when they get into the salon, they are going to want to continue that and be a part of everything that we have to do. And then the last area is I do ask them, where do you see your career going? But at the same time, it's really hard to use that as a basis, right? Because if you were to think about maybe even your own career, but if you were to say 5 years ago, where do you see yourself? It may be where you thought, but it most likely isn't. You know, things change, avenues change. And so I think that it's too hard to ask people, especially somebody that hasn't even started their career yet, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 3 years? Because it's such a long amount of time that some things might change. And so I do like to ask some ideas about what their interests are in a career, but I don't try and lock them into a timeline because I just think that the timeline can change. And we're really focused on putting the right person in the right place. Our second one, okay, so we had our chat. Our second one, we'll invite them back, and their second time back is a talent interview. And so I'm not looking or expecting them to be, you know, the most amazing haircutter in the world. You know, that is pretty unrealistic if that is the level that you're going to try and hold somebody to. But I want to make sure that they can move through a haircut. And I also want to watch their body language and how they interact with the salon. Do they take care of the equipment? What they are responsible for on their talent interview is bringing their model and choosing the look that they're going to do. I don't have them do color. I think that I can make a pretty good judgment on their talent level based on just how they are operating through a haircut and a style. But how did they come dressed to work in the salon that day? How did they interact with their model? Most of the time their model is probably going to be a friend or a family member. And so did they treat them like a friend or a family member? Or did they actually treat them like they were a salon client and, you know, didn't have any inappropriate conversations or something like that? Did they behave like you would want them to behave working in your environment? And you always want to be encouraging, you know. I wouldn't walk over and if I saw, you know, let's say like they left a corner on the haircut, I wouldn't want to call it out in front of people. You know, I would just like sort of look through the haircut, thank them for their time, tell them, you know, it looks great. The last thing that we want to do is embarrass somebody on an interview while they're in our salon. Finally, the third piece of our hiring process is a shadow day. And I actually think that multiple shadow days could be a good idea because we know that the salon changes depending on what day of the week it is. But the point of the shadow day is that if we have gotten to that point, we have already decided that we want to work with this individual. I don't want to waste people's time, and I don't want to waste my time. And so if we have decided through chatting with them and looking at how they work that we think that they'll be a good fit for the salon, then we will invite them back. They can shadow with us for a day. And the reason is that as much as we've decided that we want to work with them, we want to make sure that they've decided that they want to work with us. And so it is vital that they have a good shadow experience and a truthful shadow experience. Because the last thing that I would really want is for somebody to get in, be excited, think that this is the right place, and then a month or 2 months later be like, ooh, no, you know, I don't like working the way that Ben has this place set up. And so that's why I think multiple shadow days would be good, because obviously if you have somebody shadow on a Saturday, it's probably usually pretty busy. It's usually a big day in the salon versus maybe your Monday or Tuesday, depending on what your slow day is. And so inviting them back to do multiple days could be a really good idea so that they get a more well-rounded look at the salon. And so I think that's why we're going to move in that direction of having people come back for multiple things. So that's why we recruit, and that's how we hire. There's a system to hiring, and that is so that we can make sure that we're getting solid candidates. I think that it is important, again, like I said, to build a team based around the purpose, and that's why we hire for culture, not for talent. Talent can be taught, and if you've got a solid education program, you should know how long the program is and about how they're about a timeline-ish of how their talents will develop. But hiring for culture, I think, makes such a big difference when it comes to the challenges that you might face. Now, I was talking about coming out of school, but honestly, I wouldn't change anything if I was hiring somebody that was already a stylist. I would still hire them based off the fact that I like them. You could be the most talented person in the world. You might even have a clientele that wants to follow you. But if the person is a jerk, why would you want to work with them, right? So that's why we hire for culture. I would not recommend ever getting into a situation where you're simply hiring somebody based off of their talent, and I certainly wouldn't do it based off of what you think the income that the business will make simply based off of hiring it. If somebody comes in and says, I've got a $100,000 clientele, I know that it sounds like that's going to be an awesome thing, but it also is potentially a really big mess. And I've seen it happen so many times. That's why I just feel a little conservative about the situation, is that they feel like, look at what I'm doing for you. What are you doing for me? And again, that may not be the same situation in every situation, but I think that it's something to pay attention to. So I hope that helps. I hope that helps you build a team. And I know that it has worked really, really well for us. Right now, we have a team that I am just so proud of and believe in so much. And these were the steps that we used in order to create it. So thank you. I would love your feedback on this episode. What is your hiring process? How do you think it's working? You can do email, inbox me, ben@thehairloftltd.com. Please, with this podcast, subscribe, share it with your friends, rate us. That's sort of the currency when it comes to podcasting. Your subscriptions and ratings mean a lot. And like I said, you can follow us. I'm at BNJMNJ on Instagram, and Form and Function is at FFSalonEDU. But until the next episode, I hope that you get out there, you build your team, and you live the successful lifestyle that you want to live.